If you've been coasting towards your results so far this year, not quite accelerating at the speed that you would like to, this episode is for you. Ladies, today we are going to break down why certain patterns either keep us stuck or they just slow down our results, they slow down our progress. Welcome back to the Nicola Graham Podcast. I hope everybody is doing fabulous and enjoying the 2 episodes a week. I did have a client say to me the other day, Nick, I don't know how you are getting this much content out, because I also do coaching videos inside of our community, and I've got to say at this point I feel like I'm non-stop recording. So I'm hoping that the content that I'm putting out and the topics that I'm covering are hitting the mark for you all. Like, the whole point of this podcast is to speak more on the things that maybe we're thinking that we're not talking about, and maybe just to offer a bit of a reframe and a bit of actual education around some of what's keeping us stuck. But as always, and I'll say this at the beginning of the episode rather than the end, if there's anything more different that you'd like to listen to, anything that I've spoken about that you'd love more on, or anything that I've not spoken about at all, and it can be anything, ladies, because this is the Fit and Unfiltered podcast. So whilst we're largely going to keep it around fitness and health and mindset and diet and sleep and all of the other good stuff, if there's something that feels off topic but you would love a podcast on it, please let me know, because at this point in time, I am recording what feels like I'm recording some form of content every day. And I would love to know, what is it that we want to hear more about? Obviously, I gather a lot of my ideas from the challenges that I see my clients face and a bit of the journey that I know that I'm on. Anyway, without further ado, I'm going to touch on the Unfiltered before we get into this week's podcast, which is just a bit of a shout out really for all of the women who have chosen the lifestyle approach. And I'll tell you why. So I was in Tesco the other day and I'm getting Easter stuff. And I bumped into a girl who I've known for a long time, and she worked with me for like a short period back when I was doing one-to-one coaching, and like life has changed since then. She got a new job, started a family, everything else. Anyway, since then, she's reached out to me a couple of times about working together, and she's never stepped up to it. She's never sealed the deal. She's always sort of like toys with the idea. Anyway, in that whole period of time, she's done quite a few very popular crash diets, and worked with different coaches that might glamorize a 6-week or an 8-week shred or whatever else it is. So bumps into her the other day and she was like, Nick, I'm in the worst shape of my life and I'm mortified when I see anyone. And I was like, obviously, I was like, don't be daft, because again, I've spoken about this on the podcast. It's crazy, isn't it, what we think other people are seeing versus what people are actually seeing when they bump into us. Like, for me, it was just really good to see. I've not seen it in years. But she was instantly just like an open book, just like spilling, I've been doing this, that and the other. And I'm thinking, I know that you have, because I've seen you posting about it. And, it's, for me, like, if you come to work with thriving women, best decision that you'll make. Hands down, 100% best decision that you'll make. But that's your decision. Anyway, she said to me, long story short, she said, well, I wish I'd have just known my better self. And those years ago when I reached out to you, I wish I'd have just made a start, because I would not be in this position now. And I was like, well, listen, we can't go back and change things. We live and we learn. And unfortunately, like, she has learned the lesson the hard way, because got herself into a position where it's become quite a yo-yo cycle for the last couple of years. Anyway, won't go into the depths of our entire conversation, but 2 unfiltered things to come out of that. First of all, please, if you are in that position, if you're listening to this and you are the woman who bumps into someone in the supermarket and instantly feels dread because you're like, oh my gosh, she's going to think I've put on all kinds of weight and she's going to be judging me, and like, please give yourself some self-compassion, because we are so overly critical of ourselves and we worry so much about what other people are thinking. And actually, a lot of the time, whoever it is that you bump into is genuinely just happy to see you. And I don't know why we can't convince ourselves of that. Why does it feel so hard to accept that, like, someone might just be happy to see me and not judging the way that we look or the dress size? So that's the first one. But the second one, and as I was walking back to my car with a trolley full of Easter bits, I was like, you know what? Shout out to the women, this is what I'm saying in my head, who have taken that uncomfortable route. I am going to go down the lifestyle approach. I know it's not going to be easy. I know I'm going to have to learn on the job. I know I'm going to have to take the wheel, because that's ultimately what you're deciding. When you take a lifestyle approach, when you come to work with us inside of Thriving Women, you are taking the wheel. I'm going to guide you, support you, give you everything that you need. but you are going to take the wheel. Versus maybe you follow a fad diet that tells you specifically what you're going to eat, what you can eat, what you can't eat. And that feels like the more doable option in that moment. It's never going to be sustainable, ladies. If you're of a certain age to me, we're in our 40s, we've done it. We've done it a million times. We know it's not a sustainable option because we want to be able to eat the foods that we enjoy, but we also want to understand how to eat in a way that is going to have us feeling at our best. And so shout out to all of the women who have taken what feels like the hard road, but actually turns out to be the best decision that you could ever make. And it does change everything. I was just chatting with this old friend, I'm going to call her, because we've not spoken in so long, and she was just full of regret. And she was full of, I wish I hadn't done this and I wish I hadn't done that. And I feel, just physically and emotionally just in the worst shape ever. And anyway, we did have a long conversation off the back of that. And, I've offered her help and support. And it's hard, isn't it? It's hard to shout up to somebody who who you've worked with before, to say, listen, I need help and I need support. But again, if you're in that position, maybe not even with somebody that you know, but you feel like, okay, I could actually do with some help and support now. Not because we don't know what we're doing. We've clarified that, ladies, haven't we? We're all good at saying, I know what I should do, I just need to do it. That's a whole other ball game to actually being able to sustain the consistency it takes to get out the other side. And that consistency, when you're doing it on your own, it just feels like constant push-pull, because it's really hard to hold ourselves accountable. And so that brings me on to today's episode. If you do feel that you've got to this point in the year, maybe the results have not come at the speed that you'd hoped, or maybe life has thrown a few curveballs, or maybe you've hit a bit of a plateau. Let's talk about maybe some of the patterns that might be keeping you stuck. And I'm pulling this from client conversations and what I see my ladies struggle with more so, because I know that really if we're seeing it in that minority, it's surely going to be relevant to us all. So first of all, let's call out what we see to be probably the biggest sticking point. Is we start strong, we fall off, we start again Monday. Can we all agree that that is a cycle that we're all very familiar with? Whether or not you're on a health and fitness journey, again, I work with women who still struggle with this, and we've worked together for a while, and it still feels like Monday to Friday, I'm dialed in, Nick. Weekend comes, I fall off. Monday, I'm back in the game. And it's a cycle that can go on for, my God, it can go on for decades, it can go on for years. Like, if you've been in a position now where you feel as though you've never quite been where you want to get to for as long as you can remember, you probably fall into that cycle. Or, for a large majority of the time, maybe there's been bouts of entire weeks and months feeling like you're off plan. But the majority of the time, I think we can all agree, it's that kind of like Monday to Thursday, we're okay, we're dialed in. Weekends, just all hell breaks loose. So there's a couple of things that I want to talk about here, because if we're going to course redirect, if we're going to go into Q2 of the year and we're going to feel back in the driver's seat and armed with a new way of looking at things, then we've got to know where our effort is best put to use. And that is going to be of a weekend. And I'll talk about the cycle first of all, this sort of stop-start cycle, because I know a lot of you, Easter will probably trigger this, the stop-start cycle, whether it's the Easter weekend or the entire period that your kids are off, if you're off with your kiddos at the moment. And I spoke about this earlier in the week. A lot of it is in our mindset, but it's also a large part of the time it's down to these unrealistic expectations, because we start the journey, or we start the week, or we start new goals, and we know where we want to get to, but we've got no real expectation of how long it should take, what the journey should look like, and again, where we need to be putting our best efforts in. So that Monday to Friday, nailing that is really not where you need to be putting your focus, effort and attention. If the weekends are what keeps throwing you off, but it's just another comfort zone, isn't it, that we fall into? We fall into, okay, I'm going to nail Monday to Friday and I'm going to try and be really good at the weekend, rather than I'm going to nail the weekend and then I'm just going to work to rinse and repeat the Monday to Friday that I've already established. We give ourselves that little bit of a buffer still. So we need to get very realistic with what we are expecting to change. I said this to a client earlier in the week, because she was saying to me, and she works in a very high pressured, fast pace. I can't think of a word to describe the culture or the environment. She's a medic, and some days she doesn't really even see daylight out of clinic. She, gets 20 minutes rather than the allocated 30 to eat lunch. And she's got all of these other restrictions that she's working really hard to somehow navigate around and like shoehorn in her own goals. But I was saying to her, we've got to get very clear on, first of all, what we expect the outcome to be. But also, you've got to acknowledge that if what you're doing at the moment, and I want you to listen to this bit, ladies, if what you're doing at the moment is keeping you in maintenance, okay? Because this is going to remove overwhelm for a lot of you, especially going into the Easter weekend, or even just coming out the back of it, depending on when you're listening to this. But if what you're doing at the moment is keeping you at maintenance, so you're not gaining any weight, you're not getting any less fit, we're not seeing results take a nosedive, but we're just not progressing the way that we would like to. Know that what that means is that we just need to tweak something consistently in order to then get the ball rolling. So, give you an example. Everything that you're doing now is currently keeping you at maintenance, and you are currently doing an average of 8,000 steps a day. This is just an example. Okay, so next week, in order to progress from where you're at now, why don't we keep everything as it is, everything, but we're going to increase your step count from 8 to 10,500. So we're going to just move that one metric. Now that is progress. Now, is that going to accelerate in the way that we would like to? Well, it's definitely going to create some sort of shift. Maybe we want to accelerate a little bit more. So maybe we're going to look at the water goal also, which is only being 2 litres at best. And we're going to increase that to 3. So next week, you're going to keep everything else as it was. You're not going to get overwhelmed, but you're going to do 10,500 steps and you're going to do 3 litres instead of 2. And the reason that I positioned this in this way to this client is because she has got a very tight schedule and a very high demanding job and is working very long hours and has got a family and everything else, which I'm sure a lot of you ladies have also got. And so the overwhelm of having to do everything is keeping her feeling stuck. And actually, when we look at it and we go, right, okay, so you've lost all of this weight up until this period, but now we've hit a bit of a plateau. But what's happening is you're managing to maintain the loss. So you're maintaining the weight that you've already lost. You're able to keep it off. So what you've done so far is working, but we just now want to dial it up just that little notch more now so that we get back on course with progressing. And so we've put a plan in place for the next 14 days, and we'll review as we do on a weekly basis. But for the next 14 days to remove overwhelm and to get us back tracking in the right direction. Now, if you're listening to this and you've also been at a plateau or you're feeling very overwhelmed by what to change first of all, look at the key needle movers, your nutrition, your sleep, your hydration, your general movement. Start to measure them. Which ones, pick one, which ones we want to tighten up. We know the biggest needle mover is nutrition, 100%, because normally that is where bad habits, stress response, poor behaviours kick in. Again, that's, inside of Thriving Women, we've got boundaries, we've got frameworks, and we diet without any restrictions, but the mindset work that goes behind the nutrition really helps you to make those better decisions. But if you just look at one of those variables and you make a decision to just put all of your efforts into creating change against one of them variables for the next 7 days, you will see a difference. And 9 times out of 10, even just one of those variables, even just one, has a knock-on effect to the next. So if you're walking more, that means that you're going to be regulating your hormones more so. Okay, so you'll feel better regulated. You're going to get more of this serotonin, which is the happy hormone. Well, what do you think that's going to impact? That's going to impact stress management, which is going to impact stress response eating, which is going to impact how you feel in yourself, which is going to impact your weight, which is then probably going to bring on a sense of control. You're going to feel a little bit more at ease, which means you might get off to sleep a little bit, easier in the night. Then you're less reliant on caffeine the next day because you've had a more restful night's sleep. And it knocks on from there. And I speak about this more so inside of our community with coaching clients because it's an ecosystem. And we want to make sure that we're looking at it as an overall. But when you are just starting and when you're trying to move out of a plateau, sometimes that can be very overwhelming. Like, I've got to look at this whole stress and sleep and this and that. So just choose one. Ladies, remove overwhelm. Just choose one, but commit to it. That's the hardest part, I think, is that actually once we've decided, okay, do you know what? Actually, I'm a little bit up and down here with my water intake and my steps. I am going to commit to those 2 for the next 7 to 10 days. And I'm not going to miss, even if it's raining outside, even if I feel tired, even if I don't feel thirsty, I'm committing to these two. That is the launch pad. That is what is going to create the momentum. So we've been led to believe, haven't we, in like this diet culture way, is that, and it's the same scenario with the all or nothing. It's like we feel that we've got to change everything all at once, or if you've hit a plateau and you have been doing all of the things, but now you're at a stage where maybe results have started to slow down, progress has started to slow down, and it started to feel overwhelming because we convince ourselves, instead of looking at it from the very rational side of like, oh, okay, so I've lost all of this weight, or I've got to this fitness level, or I've managed to, achieve this many kilometres on my run, or whatever the goal has been. And I'm actually maintaining that. So I'm not going backwards. I'm sustaining the progress I've made, but I'm now not tracking forward at the speed that I was before. Instead of looking at it from that position, we convince ourselves, oh no, I'm going backwards. Old habits are creeping back in. What I'm doing isn't working. I'm definitely not capable of this change that I've set myself up for. And we absolutely dramatise. And we almost sabotage anything that we've done well. We disregard it because our progress has stalled. But a plateau isn't always a bad thing. It's just feedback that you've absolutely adapted to what you're doing so far. And so again, like in everything that we do, ladies, when we're trying to transform on any level, we're just trying to create an adaptation of some sort. And so when your body adapts and it customizes to, she trains this amount of times a week, and you walk this amount of steps, and you eat in this way, if you want to continue to see changes and to see transformation, then we just want to keep manipulating those variables to create more adaptation, because the body is so smart. So it will catch up. And that's why I speak about like even maintenance, even to maintain, requires effort. Like I still have to show up. I know I talk about I've maintained a healthy body weight and lifestyle, but it still requires me to plan for myself and to get up of a morning and go to the gym even when I don't want to, and have the early night even when I'm dying to watch the next episode of whatever it is that we're watching. We've just started Lioness. Has anyone been watching that? I'm going to go off on a tangent. I don't know how old it is. Salma Hayek. Anyway, it's a bit gritty. Anyone who knows me on a personal level will know that I don't really like watching the gritty stuff. I mean, I want to see what happens, but anything that disturbs me, it will play on my mind. Anyway, we had to turn that off the other night, and I was dying to know what happened in the next episode, but I was like, nope, I'm getting up in the morning and going to the gym, and I don't want to be lagging for the entire day, so we've got to go to bed. So whatever stage that you are at will require some level of effort, but depending on where you want to get to next might mean that we've got to dial things up a little bit. So we need to move away from all or nothing, feeling like we need to change everything all at once, every step of the journey. That is not the case, but you do have to be willing to track the data. And go back and listen to, I think it was maybe 2 weeks ago, and we spoke about the data points that are worth looking at versus the ones that maybe we don't need to stress as much about. Non-negotiables, and I know I talk about this a lot, but going into this weekend, or maybe even just this stage of the year, we've got more bank holidays ahead of us, ladies. Having your non-negotiables, not just as like a framework to start your day, but lining them up in a way that like, okay, I know that these are actually going to impact my goals, because there's a different set of non-negotiables, isn't there, for keeping us at maintenance and maybe for keeping us regulated, or, to start the day in a certain energy, versus these are the non-negotiables that are actually going to move me forward towards my goals. So they are the more robust non-negotiables. Those are the ones that like, I will get protein in every meal. I will get 10,000 steps a day. I will turn off my phone screen at 9 p.m. at night so that I can get a decent amount of restful, good quality sleep. Like they can feel a little bit more challenging than I'm going to drink a pint of water, or, that commitment to I'm going to start my day with protein is a different non-negotiable to I'm going to get 40 grams of protein in every meal. I would say that was quite a robust non-negotiable, but you can absolutely put that in place and commit to it if you want to accelerate your results. But the most important part is that we have non-negotiables, because that is the structure that we fall back on, ladies, every time. It's the framework of the day. And this is why anybody, no matter what your scenario, no matter what your job, no matter, what your circumstances, anybody can progress because you can set your non-negotiables. And as long as you can stick to them and they align with your lifestyle, and I've gave this example before, some women's non-negotiable might be a 30-minute power walk of a morning. Other women can't get that, and it might be something completely different. But whatever it is, it has to be relevant and doable for you. And if you know that you can stretch that boundary slightly, you can stretch it from 8,000 steps to 11,000 steps. And it's going to feel like a stretch, but it's doable. Like, commit to it, because sometimes that is the difference between coasting and accelerating, is like being willing to stretch the goal slightly. And I would like to think that that's something I'm quite good at doing with my clients. Anyone listening to this, client of mine, will be nodding along. Like, you'll come to me with a goal and we'll talk about what that means to you and why you want to get there and what it's going to look like. But then over the course of time, I will absolutely stretch that goal, because we're always capable of more than we realise, always. And it'll always take a coach or someone from the outside to just help us to think bigger or remove the limiting belief and stretch the goal. And honestly, every time that happens to me with my coach, I'm always like, why wasn't I thinking on that scale? Why was I limiting myself to feeling like this is my capability and this would be the end goal? So that's quite an interesting one, to just allow yourself to stretch the goal. Okay, so if we're going to redirect, we're going to accelerate, maybe at a greater pace than what you have been, or we're going to move off the plateau. Here's what I want you to focus on, rather than the need to be perfect, which, please, let's just acknowledge that even though we know that that's not doable, that's what we sign ourselves up for in our minds, isn't it? Like, we just strive for the perfect days, the perfect workouts, the perfect diet, the perfect everything, because it feels more within our control. A lot of it is down to, we feel at our best when we feel in control. Well, and I know that that's the case with me, honestly. And I'm starting to notice this now in so many other areas of life, is that like the need to feel in control just helps me feel at ease, but it's not always possible to grow. Like, the areas that I want to grow in, I recognise now that having close control over everything, it's not going to be doable long term. And it's the same with our diet and our health and our fitness, and just the need to control to the nth degree is not always doable. And then the moment that we feel as though we've kind of gone off course a little, or it's an imperfect day, it feels out of our control. So again, similar to what I've spoken about on previous episodes, when we might be off with the kiddos, or the weekend creeps around, or it just feels as though routine it's shifting and it freaks us out, and then we go into panic mode. But instead of that, I want you to, almost as if like, let's gamify what we're doing here. Your goal is to stay in the game. That's it. So we're inside this game of striving to be our fittest, healthiest, most resilient, mentally tough, body confident version of ourselves. The goal is to stay in the game. So if you feel yourself emotionally, mentally, or physically wavering, then we've got to take the steps to get ourselves back in the game. So if you're wavering mentally, you might want to listen to one of these podcasts. You might want to have a conversation with someone who gets it. You might want to listen to something that you know flicks a switch. I have a few different like podcasts and mindset videos that I will listen to that just help me to like flick a switch. If it's physical, if you're feeling like you've hit a bit of a wobble physically, you got to move your body. It's the instant cure, the instant turnaround. I'm not saying go and do a crazy HIIT class. Just go and walk. Just go and move your body. And if it's emotionally, again, like, I think as women, sometimes this is the one that's hard to get past, because it's really hard, isn't it, to turn your emotions around when you feel a certain kind of way, whether it's overwhelmed or anxious or just down or a little bit upset, or, whatever the theme is of the day, because God knows we're on a roller coaster permanently. I went out for lunch with my mum last week and we met at 11:30. And by the time we met, I was like, Mum, at this stage of my life is no joke. So Mother Nature had arrived, and I was like, I've been through a whole roller coaster of emotions already this morning. She was like, why? And you're like, I can't even describe. We've just had a whole roller coaster, just in my own head. But I'll give you, sort of like share with you what I have been doing, which tends to work for me. First of all, just like step away from your phone, your screens, replying to messages, having a little scroll, whatever it is. I tell you why I say that one. Most people probably think, well, how is that making an impact? So the large majority of us, when we feel emotionally depleted or overwhelmed, anxious, any of the above, sometimes what we're looking for or what we think we need is that, it's that little hit of like serotonin, dopamine, and we scroll. It's a wild way that we're now wired, I think, just as a society. We have a scroll or we'll have a little look at something. We just generally tend to pick up our phones, whether it's to online shop, check our emails. Like, it just provides us with that quick sense of relief, but actually removing that completely and just allowing yourself some headspace can be the most regulating thing that you can do. Having a cry if you need it, having a good hug or a good cuddle if you need it, if you've got someone nearby who you can allow yourself to do that with, or just, the simple stuff, getting some fresh air or just taking some big deep breaths and allowing yourself to feel the emotions, I think is really important. I feel as though I've gone off on a tangent with that one, but it's something that we don't talk about enough, is how to take care of ourselves emotionally. And what we try to do is we just try to suppress it and not talk about it. And in not talking about it, we then continue to feel as though we're alone. And classic example, like me on Saturday, I did not come onto social media and start talking about the roller coaster that I'd been on already by 11:30 a.m. What I mean by that is, when you just wake up and you feel a certain kind of way, and then you might end up feeling emotional, and then, you're feeling like something's winding you up, and you're like replaying the conversation in your mind, and it was just, oh my gosh, it was like a little gremlin had just jumped in my head. And we don't talk about it, and I definitely didn't bring that to social media, and maybe I should start doing more so, because it normalizes a lot of the time what we're actually struggling with. So we think we're struggling with discipline, willpower, all the other stuff, motivation, whatever, but it's the emotions of the day, and dependent on, oh my God, one of a million things can absolutely depend on our emotional state. So we've got to get more comfortable with owning where we're at. And if we feel a certain kind of way, just allowing ourselves to feel it, not reaching for our mobile phone, not dramatizing it, like not feeling like, oh, why do I feel this way? And then we start to sabotage and beat ourselves up. Just acknowledging that, like, I'm feeling a bit low, or I'm feeling as though I'm not good enough this morning, or I'm feeling a bit anxious for some reason, and actually just allowing ourselves to feel it is also a massive part of then being able to move forward and accelerate. And that's just our emotional fitness and our emotional well-being. And maybe that is a whole episode in itself, ladies, because I always say that we want to bring to this podcast the conversations that are going on in our heads that we're not talking about. And maybe that is something that we need to bring to a future episode. But for certain, if you are ready to accelerate from this moment forward, like looking at those three areas, mental, physical and emotional well-being, is important. Remembering that it's not just about counting calories or getting these crazy workouts. In order to accelerate your results and be able to continue moving at the pace in which you want to move to see progress, to get to the end result, whatever that might be, we've really got to take care of ourselves in our entirety. And this is how we stay in the game. The goal, next 7 days, keep me posted. Let me know how you get on. Stay in the game. That is it. The minute. And I want you to, honestly, gamify it. Like, I'm not by any means a gamer. Is anyone? Is it just a guy thing? I don't know. I don't want to stereotype us there. But, like we might have our Whoop or our Outer Rings or whatever it is. We like to see the data. We like to see the stats. Okay, that's basically gamifying on some level. I want you to have that approach when it comes to the next 7 days and your results. And the minute that you fall down a pothole or you feel like you fell off, the goal is just get back in the game, because that's where the biggest transformations are built from, ladies. It's not perfection. It's not 100% consistency. It's getting back in the game quicker than you ever did before and continuing to do that. And then you build consistency from there, and then you build resilience, and then everything else starts to click in, whether it's the muscle that you're building, the weight that you're losing, the metabolic rate, the great sleep, HRV scores, whatever the data is, whatever the goal is that you're tracking towards, that is where the biggest acceleration is going to come from, is just staying in the games. So remember, minimum standards, repeatable weeks, not just repeatable days, not just Monday to Friday, repeatable weeks. Stop restarting, stay in the game. If you can break this cycle, everything will change. And as I will always say, most of you listening, it's not that you need to try harder. Like, honestly, we don't even feel as though we've got the capacity for that half of the time, but we do have to have a smarter approach. And if you feel as though things are changing, or maybe you've tried some of what I've spoken about, but you've hit a certain age and actually this plateau feels different, and it might be because of hormonal changes or the beginning of perimenopause or whatever stage that you're at, then the likelihood is that we just need a different approach. That doesn't mean that you need to push harder. It doesn't mean that you need to try harder, have more discipline, be more strict, as we like to tell ourselves. But we do have to have an approach that meets us where we're at. And so if you know you're going to need help, support, guidance on that, or you just want to be part of a community of, honestly, I cannot sum us up any better than a community of thriving women who hold a standard, raise the bar and hold that standard, then drop me a message. As always, all of the links, all of the information that you need is in the show notes below. And I will look forward to maybe hearing from a few of you, hearing any feedback, any other podcast, topic, subject, ideas. As I said at the beginning of the show, let me know. And I will catch you all on the next episode of the Nicola Graham Podcast.